Welcome back to Whitney Alex Works recap of The Bachelorette Season 18, Episode 5. In this episode, the remaining 11 men travel to Michelle's home state of Minnesota, but the drama continues as each rose given has more meaning, and of course, some men are imploding as the pressure to make a deep connection builds. Let's dive in. We start week 5 with a montage of the 11 men traveling to the land of 10,000 lakes, all excited to continue to connect with Michelle in her home state. Meanwhile, Michelle is happy to be back in Minnesota as she checks in with her support team, her parents. She fills them in on what has happened so far, saying she has narrowed the men down from 30 to 11. And then we see the men walking around Minneapolis, and Michelle meets up with them and welcomes them to her home state. Then she tells them that the first one-on-one starts now. Minnesota Michelle invites Minnesota Joe on the week's first one-on-one, and the men not invited are jealous as Michelle and Joe take off to explore Michelle's hometown together. Joe's one-on-one starts with Michelle driving him around, and occasionally they lean in to kiss each other. They head over to a Twins baseball game, and Michelle throws the first pitch. This portion seemed to be filmed pre-baseball game, and Michelle and Joe share a kiss cam moment. Afterward, they head to Michelle's high school where she shows Joe around, showcasing her basketball years, sharing moments in a yearbook where Joe drops a hella. And of course, two mutual basketball players head to the gym where they play one-on-one. And we see that Michelle apparently can't miss a basket. And the question is, can Michelle and Joe connect further than their mutual interest in sports? At the night portion of Joe's one-on-one, both are happy about how the day went, saying they are glad they made new memories together as they had a similar experience growing up in Minnesota. Michelle admits that she was glad that she picked Joe for this date, but then the mood shifts to a more serious tone as Joe opens up about heavy topics. So again, trigger warning for heavy conversations ahead. Michelle asked Joe about his reservations and his emotions. Joe, knowing he is a reserved person, cites his standoff nature was just how he was raised, and then opens up even further about his struggles in sports as he suffered injuries playing basketball. He had to get surgery for broken bones in his foot, and then he had to get even more surgeries after the first surgery seemed to be botched. And Joe struggled with anxiety and depression as he tried to rehab, but he couldn't get back to his peak athleticism, and he even had suicidal thoughts. But then he persevered as he had to find himself outside of his basketball identity. Michelle shares in his emotions as they both are tearful about Joe's story. And Michelle was moved that Joe was able to open up about such personal struggles, and they share a kiss, furthering their connection to each other. And Michelle tells the camera that her feelings for Joe have severely deepened. And ultimately, Michelle gives a rose to Joe, securing him another week in Minnesota. And at the end of the date, they head to a Ferris wheel and ride it together, sharing more intimate moments. The next date is a group date with 9 men invited, which means the men on the date have an 11% chance of securing a rose. Before the group date, we find out that Nayte gets the other one-on-one for week 5, which completely pisses Chris S. off, thinking that his so-called warning about Nayte last week was ignored by Michelle. So Chris continues to feel icy about Nayte, and at the group date, Chris will continue to be a sore spot in the overall mood. The 9 men head to Minnesota Vikings Stadium where the men greet Michelle, and it's going to be another sports date. Only instead of football, the men are going to be tested on how Viking-like they are. Michelle introduces the Vikings, and the men seem to think NFL players were going to show up, but in actuality, real Vikings or men in costume show up, dressed up and ready to test the men in various ways. First up, the men have to get dressed in Vikings attire, where Chris has to wear a centaur costume, and you can tell he is pissed about it, having to wear whitey-tighties on the last group date. And the men have to taste some strange medieval food where it's another fear factor type situation where they have to eat the unappealing food that's presented. Then the men have to yell out Michelle's name in a contest, with Rick's attempt cracking me up, but Clayton seemed to be in his element. And lastly, the men have to throw a block of lumber, and surprisingly, Chris S. throws it the furthest, probably in an attempt to not be portrayed as weak. But at the end of the day portion, Clayton is crowned a true Viking, and everyone heads off to the night portion of the date. We start the night portion off with a sparkle. Michelle is dressed in a sparkly green dress where she can literally be seen. And this group date is going way better than last week's where Michelle felt unseen. And the men start to romance Michelle even further with standouts like Clayton, who tells Michelle he is coming out of his shell and compliments her on her apparent confidence. And Clayton and Michelle end up sharing a kiss. Next up is Brandon, who seems head over heels for Michelle, where again, these two are all over each other, sharing some more intense kisses. And as the men one by one are shown talking to Michelle, Chris S. is feeling sour about Michelle giving the one-on-one date to Nayte. And Chris is acting strange as the other men are getting concerned about his behavior. And at the end of the group date, Michelle gives Clayton the group date rose, securing him another week. Michelle's one-on-one with Nayte has arrived, and they head to a lake to hang out and get to know each other more. And Michelle has a surprise for him. She is bringing her friends, Tia and Allie, eager to get to know Nayte, all in the name of protecting their friend's heart. Michelle's friends can tell Michelle and Nayte have chemistry, and Michelle admits that she is catching feelings, and we are then treated to romance novel shots of Michelle and Nayte jumping in the lake together and sharing more kisses. Meanwhile, Chris S. is imploding and is about to go full reckless and decides all of a sudden during Nayte's one-on-one that he needs to talk to Michelle, and production drives him over, and unbeknownst to Michelle and Nayte, they continue to share their feelings for each other during the nighttime portion of their date, with them talking about their past relationships and how Michelle was in a toxic relationship that she struggled to get out of, and she reiterates that she didn't feel seen in her previous 3-year relationship and would get sick to her stomach. But then they are interrupted by Chris, who seems to be in his own world with his dislike for Nayte, and proceeds to interrupt their conversation. Nayte's face says it all, and Michelle is equally shocked. Chris takes Michelle over to talk privately while Nayte is in disbelief, and we're about to see Chris's climax as he tells Michelle that he feels insecure being here and feels that he was played, that Michelle chose Nayte for the one-on-one after he warned her about him. Michelle then proceeds to put Chris S. in his place, saying that she doesn't need him speaking on her behalf and that she, being a woman of color, can make her own decisions. And ultimately, Michelle is not dealing with BS anymore and decides right then and there to send Chris S. home. She walks him out and Chris S. leaves, heading to a car to take him home. 10 men remain. Michelle then heads back to her date with Nayte and tells him that she sent home Chris S., and then proceeds to give Nayte a rose, securing him another week with Michelle. And afterward, they head outside to a show of fireworks where they kiss passionately, and it is revealed that Michelle is falling for Nayte, and really Chris S. didn't stand a chance trying to get between these two. The cocktail party is upon us, and Michelle is wearing more shine, this time a reflective metallic gown, and she immediately addresses that she sent home Chris S., saying that he wasn't her person. And the top 10 men do their best to continue to win over Michelle's heart with standouts like Rick, who walks the streets of Minneapolis together in a romantic city nights vibe, where Rick tells Michelle that he is willing to move to Minnesota to be with her, and the two end up kissing. Also, head over heels, Brandon continues to swoon over Michelle, where she presents him with a birthday cake, and they end up sharing more kisses. And Granny Smith, or Rodney as he's known, who we haven't seen in a while, continues to pursue Michelle as they head out to view the city lights, yelling into the ether together, and they share a passionate kiss, furthering their connection. Meanwhile, Martin continues to dig his own demise as he talks about high maintenance women in Miami, which Michelle has a hard time with, and they end up having another miscommunication situation. And Olu, who seems to get what he wants eventually, wants Martin to go home, as he says it with a big smile. And with each week, narrowing down the men gets harder as real feelings are starting to develop for Michelle. Going into the fifth rose ceremony, Joe, Clayton, and Nayte are safe, and Michelle calls out the men in the following order: Rick, Olu, Brandon, Martin, and we are treated to the first appearance of Tayshia and Caitlin, saying this is the last rose, and the last rose goes to Rodney. Now only 8 men remain. Week 5 rose ceremony exits are Casey, an advertising creative director, and Leroy, a biomedical PhD student who I swear was an undercover spy or something for this season, as we really never saw him interact with Michelle. And that's it for this episode. Thank you for watching Whitney Alex Works recap of The Bachelorette Season 18, Episode 5. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe at Whitney Alex Works for more videos in the future. Also, the next recap will be delayed because I will be busy over Thanksgiving week, so I will hopefully have the next video out by Saturday, November 27th or Sunday the 28th. I apologize for the delay and hope to be back on schedule soon. Until then, see you soon.